magnificent trophy white-tailed buck. He is the most elusive and difficult of all North American big game animals to hunt. But here we are, almost within stone-throwing distance of a really remarkable specimen. You don't get this close by accident. You get here on purpose and with a plan. You will also be able to get within range of big bucks by the conclusion of this video, which shows you the principles, the strategies, and the tactics necessary to go to the deer. I'm Jerry Chiappetta. I'm your guide in this award-winning Sportsman's video collection of programs designed to make you a more successful trophy white-tailed deer hunter. In our programs today, our aim is to help you get close to trophy whitetail by concentrating on how to go to the deer. We'll begin by briefly reviewing some of the important facts about trophy buck environment and behavior. We'll put these facts together and make a formula for successful trophy whitetail hunting. Then we'll apply that formula to some exciting hunting situations. You'll learn how to organize your fellow hunters to form a drive for trophy whitetails. And you'll see how you and one other experienced hunter can drive deer out of the thickest cover in what I call the two-man hunt technique, or the two-man drive. We'll take you on a beautiful float trip through big buck country. And finally, we'll help you fine-tune your skills for the most challenging hunt of all, the still hunt, going one-on-one against a trophy buck. Deer hunting wouldn't be very exciting if the animals were completely predictable. We'd just learn how to do it, and once we figured out the special combination to success, well, the magic and the mystique of the hunt would vanish for us. I know it certainly would for me. No, thank goodness, trophy bucks are not completely predictable, but the more we know, the better our predictions will be. That's why trophy hunting is a lifelong learning experience. That's why, too, it takes a special type of dedicated, knowledgeable outdoorsman to be a successful big buck hunter. I can tell you right here, right now, there are no shortcuts, no magic buck lures or scents, no big secret that'll make you an instant success. It's really a lot of little things all done the right way. How do you become a successful trophy whitetail hunter anyway? First of all, you have to decide that you're not going to settle for anything less than a really big deer. That means having the patience to let smaller bucks get by, even at the risk of going home without any deer. You need to have the dedication to get out and scout your hunting area, because successful trophy hunters scout early and scout often. You must be committed to improving your skills. That means practicing so you're accurate with your rifle or shotgun. Then practice some more to keep those shooting skills sharp every season. But the biggest factor in becoming a successful trophy buck hunter is your knowledge. Knowing as much as you can about this magnificent animal. You need to know where he lives, how he uses his environment to survive. You must know his abilities, his senses, his habits. You need to be aware of his behaviors that set him apart from other, smaller, lesser bucks. The successful trophy hunter uses his knowledge to come up with strategies for getting close to deer. Environment plus behavior plus strategies. It's like a formula for success. In the companion video in this trophy series, we apply that formula for success to hunting big bucks from stands where the deer comes to us. And much of that same knowledge applies here. Whether you drive or stalk deer, you must know how to find the buck's general environment. That means going to the record books, like Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young, to find areas that historically produce trophy-size racks. When you check the records, you'll find that most of the big bucks come from the major agricultural states and provinces. That makes sense because it takes a good food supply to grow a big deer. But you'll also find that trophy bucks come from virtually every other part of the whitetail's range. There could be a pocket of big bucks in or near your regular hunting area. Well, how do you go about finding those big bucks? The key is looking for places where hunting pressure is low. You see, it takes a buck 4 or 5 or 6 years to grow a maximum size rack, and in heavily hunted areas, well, most bucks just don't live that long. To up your odds for harvesting a big buck, you have got to hunt where other hunters don't. The deepest, most tangled swamps. That's where you want to be because most hunters won't venture there. Trophy bucks are exceptional animals. We don't have to remind you of that. We don't have to exaggerate their natural behaviors and abilities. There's no evidence, for example, that a big buck's senses are any sharper than those of the average deer. They don't have to be. All deer have incredibly sharp, sensitive noses, and they can smell you coming for hundreds of yards, depending on the right conditions. And they have excellent day and night vision. Modern research has shown that deer may see color as well as human beings. But for safety's sake, don't give up your blaze orange. By using the cover to break up your outline, and by slowing down your movements, you can avoid being seen. With his sharp ears, a deer can hear everything around him, but he'll spook only when something sounds out of place. And that could be the click of a loud safety being pushed off too quickly, or the noisy shuffling of an inexperienced hunter clomping down through the woods. Move like you belong in the forest. That big buck might hear you, but if you're careful, you won't set off his alarm system. You may think that deer are almost supernatural because they're so hard to find, especially big deer, but they're not. They're out there, they live there, they're there all the time. And he may be only a few dozen yards away, hiding in that thicket. Or he may be circling around, trying to get downwind so he can identify you by your scent. In many ways, the abilities and the behaviors of a big buck are the same as any other deer, with one essential difference. He has more experience. You see, a trophy buck has survived 4 or 5 hunting seasons. He knows which scents, sights, and sounds belong out in the woods and which ones don't. He's familiar with the best hiding places and the best escape routes. When you're on his turf, the odds are definitely in his favor. One way to put those odds a little more in your favor is to hunt during the rut, particularly at the peak of the rut. That's when it's easiest to find evidence of big bucks. It's also the time when they are less elusive and more vulnerable to the hunter. The buck will make rubs with his antlers and his forehead, and he'll make scrapes on the ground. To add to his scent marks, he'll urinate in those scrape areas. His scent is his calling card for females, telling them that he's available and in the mood. The biggest bucks tend to start scraping earlier than other bucks. They usually make bigger scrapes, and they usually reuse and refreshen these scrapes more frequently than younger deer. And when a buck catches the scent of a doe in heat, he follows her with single-minded intent until she is ready to stand and accept him. That's when his defenses are the lowest, and the hunter may have the opportunity of a lifetime. When you know the buck's environment and you understand his behavior, then you can plan your strategy for a successful hunt. The strategy that you choose will depend upon your hunting area, the geography of that area. It'll depend on your physical ability. It'll depend on the weather. It'll depend on your equipment and your ability to use it properly. And of course, the time of the hunting season. The skills of your hunting buddies will also have an impact. All these little things will make the difference between success and failure. We've briefly gone over some of the most important parts of your formula for successful big buck hunting. In the remainder of this program, we'll apply that formula to the strategies of driving for trophy deer, for floating a river for big deer, and still hunting one-on-one. For more information, we recommend you take a closer look at our companion trophy videos and the other 3M Sportsman's Video Collection programs. The drive is one of the most popular strategies for going to the deer. Deer drives are definitely the most productive strategy for all deer hunting when you measure productivity in terms of the number of deer taken against the number of hours you spend hunting. And in some areas, the deer drive is the most common way of hunting. The cover there is just too thick and visibility is too limited for other strategies to work very well. A drive for really big bucks must be carefully planned. That means scouting to find the big buck's environment, understanding how a big buck will behave in response to the drive, and planning your drive to fit the location where that buck lives. Someone has to take responsibility for all of these factors, and that's usually the boss of the drive, that we usually call him the drive captain. The drive is a team effort, and the captain has to know the physical abilities and skills of his hunters. He also has to know their emotional reactions. For example, will the standers hold fire until they're absolutely sure of their target? Are the drivers mature enough to carry out their assignments so the drive is a safe one? Remember, you've got one group of hunters walking toward another group of hunters, so safety must be the main concern of both the captain and everyone else on the drive.
Listen, even though you fellas know this land like the back of your hands, I have a detailed topographical map of the area. Uncle Bill and I have spent many, many hours scouting this area, so we think we know the best spots for the fellas to be on post. Donnie, Hutchie, Larry, myself, and Stephen are going to walk in from this area over here. We're going to post Uncle Bill, we're going to post Pete, we're going to post Danny and Keith along this area. These are the likely spots that we think the deer are going to be running away from us and into you. Listen, the wind will be at our back, so the deer will smell us and they're going to run away from us. They're going to run towards you fellas. Now that big buck that we've seen over here in this field, he likes to cross that stream right about in here. He doesn't want to go through this open area, but if he spooked to the open area, we've got Peter on stand right about here because he's the best long-range shot with that 7mm rifle that you have, Pete. So you'll be able to get a good shot off at him. Okay, now listen, there's not going to be any noise from the men on drive. The only noise is going to be the walking. No shouting, no whistling, no extra noises. Okay, are there any questions?
Uncle Bob, how far are we going to be apart when we drive?
It depends on how thick that cover is. If it's real thick, I want all the drivers close together so we can see each other. That way we're going to play it safe, but also the deer in the thick cover will be hiding. When the cover thins out, then the drivers spread out.
If I get a deer, will anyone come to help me?
Don't worry about that, Keith. If you shoot a deer, your grandfather will be close by and give you all the help you need.
It's a good idea we keep our scopes on a low power. This way, if we jump a trophy buck, we may get a shot at it. And be aware of where our standers are, if we do jump one.
We'll give you standers about a half hour to get in there and get settled down. So once you're relaxed, then we'll start in. I don't want any unnecessary noise as we're going in. The only noise we're going to be making is the noise caused by walking in through the woods here. I want you to be careful out there. Now remember, guys, we're not out there just to shoot any buck that we see. We're trophy hunting this time.
How do we know when the drive's over, Bob?
Some drives take longer than other drives. A drive can take up to an hour, but you don't want to drive an area too big. Some drives can be just 15 minutes. This area that we're doing is not too large, and I think in 30 minutes we'll be finished with the drive. Now listen, even though we want to have a successful hunt and get some trophy buck, the most important thing is to make sure of your target. Okay, before you take that safety off and pull the trigger, know what you're shooting at. Good luck.
A good planning session like the one we just saw covers all the factors in the formula for success. With scouting, map work, and research, you go over the places where the big buck might be living. When you decide where to place the standers and drivers, you take into account all of the buck's senses and behaviors. The standers must avoid detection. They must be downwind from the buck's escape routes. That means the wind will be blowing from where the deer is, or where we think he is, to where the standers are. If at all possible, these standers should also be up high so they have a good view. The standers need some kind of cover to break up their profiles. This could be a tree or a bush or a rock. Of course, the standers must be quiet, making no unnecessary movements. And this is something you should never do. Skyline someone at the top of a hill. The buck will see the hunter's profile and not come any closer. Now the drivers, on the other hand, they want the buck to know they're coming. If at all possible, the wind should be from the driver to the deer. In other words, on the driver's backs. For safety's sake, they should be as visible as possible to everybody, so both the deer and the hunters know where they are. And they don't have to make extra noise. Hunters driving through the brush make enough racket to keep a buck on the move. But where is he going to move to? The odds are he's not going to use the regular runways. If he's being pushed, he might use more open areas. Standers should be watching the edges and the borders, places like trails, clearings, and the right-of-way. A lot of big bucks survive by just hiding in the cover. Make sure the drivers are close enough together so they can keep the big buck from slipping back through the line. A buck may try to simply go around the drivers. So if you have enough hunters, it never hurts to send a couple of guys in 5 or 10 minutes after the main line of drivers passes. There's another kind of drive that can be very useful for the trophy hunter. That's the two-man drive. It's difficult and certainly doesn't always work, but then there's nothing that always works when you're talking about trophy bucks. The best strategy for a two-man drive is simply this. First, as always, locate the most likely area for a big buck. Then what you do is ignore the regular escape routes, which you can't possibly cover anyway, and you simply make the assumption that if a single hunter heads toward the deer, but from the downwind side of the deer, that's with the wind in his face, the buck will circle behind him. The driver moves very, very slowly, zigzagging back and forth, so he covers a lot of ground, and he takes a fair amount of time doing this. His partner comes in behind, maybe 200 or 300 yards back, depending on the type of cover and the thickness of that cover. The two-man drive, or the two-man still hunt, is much simpler than it sounds. Just think of it this way. It's one hunter helping his buddy kick out a deer so they can get a look at it. My personal favorite type of a drive is this sort of a small one with one other good trophy hunter who moves as quietly as possible, but with that common purpose to work the big buck out of his hideout. Now watch us move. This is how a quiet two-man drive or a two-man hunt works out. You can call it whatever you want. The strategy is what counts here. The first hunter knows when the second guy is going to move, either by signal or by timing or just by instinct, by knowing your partner very well. So my hunting partner over there stands while I move. When he moves, I stand silently and watch in all directions. Each man's zone of offensiveness, his smell, his noise, and his appearance intrudes on the buck's zone of defense. Remember that. Sometimes this confuses the buck into making a mistake. The only thing more advanced as to this two men go to the deer technique is the one-on-one technique, you going to the big buck without any help. Let's summarize the most important concepts that we've learned so far about deer drives. Remember, we need to answer 4 questions. 1, where is the buck hiding? 2, where are his likely escape routes? 3, where should the drivers go? And 4, where should the standers be? A float trip to get close to big bucks is not widely used. However, it is one of the most delightful ways to hunt. A float trip is ideal for handicapped or elderly hunters unable to beat the bushes during a taxing drive or have the stamina for the one-on-one contest with a wily old buck. Its greatest advantages are that it can take you into country seldom, if ever, hunted by anyone. It can bring you through some of the thickest, most impenetrable river bottom deer swamps into places that you couldn't hunt otherwise, and it can do it all silently. You don't have to make much noise to move slowly along the waterways. What do you need for a successful float? Well, first of all, you need a place for a canoe or a boat, a place that's legal. Check the local regulations carefully because hunting laws vary a great deal from one place to the next. In some spots, hunting from any kind of a watercraft is illegal. In others, you may hunt from a boat provided that it isn't motorized. In other places, you may hunt legally only if you own the land on both sides of the waterway, so it can be confusing. To go on a float trip for big deer, the first thing you need is an appropriate boat or canoe. The best canoes are light enough for 1 or 2 people to manage. They also have to be large enough to carry a deer out with you and stable enough for shooting. Metal canoes are usually too noisy unless you dress them with rubber-backed carpeting or you wear soft-soled shoes. Or you put soft rubber hoses over the gunnels. or towels or some other sort of padding on squeaky seats. Let's say that you have all of these things, that it's legal, that there's a stream right through prime big buck country, and you have the right sort of canoe or watercraft. Include in your personal equipment some flotation device, like a life jacket. Taking a dunking with your hunting clothes on at this time of the year could be extremely hazardous to your health due to the cold water, the cold weather, and the resulting hypothermia or loss of body heat. Floating for big bucks like this can be a delightful experience if you keep some pointers in mind for both safety and comfort. For example, we recommend you file a float plan. Let someone know where you'll be putting in and when you expect to reach a certain landing or takeout point. Take along with you a complete change of clothes in a waterproof bag. Be sure to take along your camera and binoculars. Dress warm, stay dry, paddle quietly, enjoy yourself, and go with the flow. A rather novel way to go to the deer. Drives can be exciting and productive, but a good drive requires a lot of people. Even a two-man drive or a two-man still hunt means that you've got to get your schedules coordinated so you have somebody to do that sort of a hunt with. And for safety's sake, you should never attempt a float trip alone. Personally, I think the still hunt is the most challenging and rewarding way to go to the deer. Trophy hunters are usually solitary people. They're loners, single, strong-smelling creatures who try to pit what wits they have against the spookiest, smartest, and biggest deer in the woods. The hunter's edge is supposed to be his intelligence, and that really isn't an edge at all for some hunters. When you're stalking deer on foot, you're on their turf, on their terms. They're the residents, we're the visitors. You no longer have the advantage of being hidden in a blind or perched in a tree, or the advantage of having others drive the deer to you, or the advantage of floating silently to the deer. This is just you and the deer, and you're going to need everything you've ever learned about trophy bucks, plus the patience and stealth and stamina and more patience. Like the old-timers say, anyone can sit on a stump or wait on a drive, but not everyone can track a buck to his bed or jump shoot him while still hunting. Still hunting, by the way, doesn't mean standing still. What it really means is being still. Still hunting is the stop-and-go method of approaching deer. Each of the hunter's stops might be for a few seconds or even a few minutes or more. Depends on what's there. As we shall see, under some circumstances, these stops might be a lot longer. And when the hunter is stopped, he searches in all directions and he listens. Then he moves again. Maybe 3 steps, maybe 5. With each new step, he gets a slightly different view of what's ahead and on both sides down through the woods. His steps are short. He keeps his balance. The looks are long. Concentration is sharp. Movements are smooth. The hunter is unhurried. There are dozens of little things that you should know, dozens of things to keep in mind when you're still hunting. but they're really not very difficult when you remember that, like for all other hunting strategies, they're based on these two guiding principles. Where is the buck? How can I avoid or deceive his warning systems? Everything you do is designed to either avoid detection or to deceive. How and where you do it is determined by what you know about the buck's habits, habitat, and behavior. The trophy hunter may only get one brief chance for success, one fleeting moment when that big buck is where you want him. When that happens, you must act. You can't afford to have anything go wrong or any piece of equipment fail. The smallest detail cannot be overlooked. That means you need proper equipment, along with the right clothing to keep you comfortable and safe. The trophy hunter has to take special care to select the very best rifle or shotgun or bow, the best binoculars, the best compass, and all the other items that we've covered in detail in successful whitetail hunting. It's a fair question to ask when you reach this stage of being a trophy hunter, shouldn't you already know all you have to know about clothing and equipment? Well, that's true, but those little details mean the difference between success and blowing that opportunity to make a kill when it presents itself. This rifle not only offers you reliability and accuracy, but it has a couple of other advantages that are worth noting. It has a short 60-degree bolt throw, and it has a top tang safety right here that's in easy reach of my thumb. The right clothing is also extremely important. It has to be warm enough for slow movement and light enough to be comfortable and quiet when moving through the brush. Your outer garment should be warm, quiet, light, comfortable, easy to move and climb in, and have a good collar or hood for protection against really nasty weather. The trousers should also be warm and quiet in the woods. I'm a mover, a still hunter, and a stalker. When I sit for hours on end, on my end, then I'll wear my thermo super insulated snowmobile suit. The message I'm trying to deliver is quite simple. Dress for the weather and dress for the type of hunting that you're going to do. Little things mean a lot. A pair of light, clear, bright binoculars, they're with me even in the darkest, dirtiest, most dismal of deer swamps. You can't shoot them if you can't see them. A variable powered adjustable scope of 2 to 7 power or 3 to 9 power is excellent. For big buck hunting in most of North America, you're well equipped with a 30-06 shooting 150 to 180 grain bullets. But of course, even the best equipment won't get you within shooting range of a big buck. You've got to have the right attitude. You've got to maintain your concentration when you hunt. Always be quizzing yourself. Where are the deer? What are they doing? Where am I headed for? How can I see the buck before he sees me? Can he smell me? Can he hear me? Approach a likely looking area with the thought that there is a buck hiding there and that you're on your final approach. Look around. Look around as though you expect to see a deer behind every bush or boulder or windfall. Search in every direction, not just out front. Study every bit of sign. Pay special attention back there to the rear. Why? Well, because deer will circle around to get downwind or behind you so they can smell you. Don't stare at one spot. Use your ears. Deer make noise when they move through the woods. Be quiet and listen to what's going on around you. If you silently keep quizzing yourself, you will mentally keep alert. if you lose that mental edge, you might as well just be out for a stroll in the woods. Let's take the principles and concepts that we've learned so far, and I'll show you some specific things that you should pay attention to while you're on a still hunt. We're very fortunate today, although it's windy, to have a fresh blanket of snow. That blanket of snow gives us like a brand new sheet of paper, and all that's written on that paper is our new evidence. For example, the snow started last night after several days of dreariness, of wind, of rain and fog, and it got colder, turned to snow. Come along, let's go down the trail and see what we can see. Here's some other evidence that you can look at after a fresh snow. You see the coyote tracks right here, just going along. It's just other evidence that animals are on the move after a siege of bad weather. And there's deer tracks over here too. See where the deer crossed? Going up here. Interesting. You can read it like a book. The snow's starting to melt. It's harder to see it, but we've got some running deer coming through here. A deer can leap 29 feet in a single bound, so these tracks aren't that far apart. Here's one here. The next one's about 6 or 8 feet. These deer obviously are taking off at a good run. Something back there must have spooked them. Here's another set where they come down together, and then way over here, another 10, 12 feet. There's where they hit again. Another 8 or 10 feet. They're over here. Here they are, see? Running, they hit here, bound over here, bound over there. They're going right down in that thick stuff. That's a good place to hunt. Very hard to get in there on your own, but it's not a bad one today. The wind is coming at me, the sun is on the side. It wouldn't be a bad place for a still hunt if you wanted to go in there and try it. We got a set of tracks here. In fact, we got about 3 different deer walking. These are not running tracks. You can see how they're fairly close together. Let me get over here and point out a few things. When you find tracks like this, what you want to look for, number one, from our point of view as trophy hunters, the size of the track. If they're all little bitty tracks like these are, I'm not too interested. They're a little bit hard to see because the snow is soft and wet. And the tracks are crusted down inside. You can look very carefully. You'll see there's snow laying on these tracks, and if you feel there, it's even crusted. So these are several hours old. You're really not interested in these. That's what you look for. If it was a big single track and it was fresh, it was really crisp and black, I'd be real interested in it and I'd take off after it. But these, I'm not interested in. Here it is now, around midday. It's actually 11:30. And you're looking for a spot to stand, for a midday spot. Let me tell you a little bit about this as I interpret this area. You see, you've got about a 50-yard or 60-yard view around. That's not bad for a hardwood area. I certainly wouldn't stand right out here by this tree. I would make my stand over here. The deer are not going to be in here on their own. They might be coming through this area if somebody was driving them or making some noise and kicking them out of their daybed area, which I think is farther down here where the pines and the creek bottom is very thick. Just keep this in mind. The stronger the winds, the thicker the cover where the deer like to hole up. Let's go take a look over there. This is not a good area for middle of the day. Some hunters don't really put a lot of thought into their daily hunting plan. Look at this. The problem with this setup, where this hunter's going, he's too much in the open. It's a bright sunny day. He should be over there on the dark side of one of those thick trees. Instead, looks like he's going to plop down right in the open, right in the sun. It's going to be too visible. If you're on a spot that you think is really good and something comes to interfere, the weather changes, it starts raining hard, the wind picks up violently, or you have other hunters that infringe on an area that you had all staked out. This all impacts on your hunting. So if you have other hunters coming through your region that you thought was going to be a perfect spot for that big trophy buck, don't be bashful, pick up and move. Here's some evidence, a buck rub, all right? It's evidence that a deer was here. This could be a couple of weeks old, could be even a month old. They start rubbing late in the summer, early in the fall to get rid of the velvet and also to start marking territory. What's more interesting to me, down here, they're hard to see, but there's some tracks in here. Now they're probably several hours old. This could be several weeks or a month old, as I said. That just tells you a deer was here. It doesn't tell you a deer is here. Here we go. This is what we've been looking for, right here. It's hard to see because the snow is starting to melt. But this is a daybed area. We probably kicked these two deer out of here coming in. It's so noisy in here, it's virtually impossible to walk up on a deer when he's bedded in this thick stuff. That's why they're bedded here. You see the outline of the body right here? We probably kicked that deer out. This is a real big bed up here. Come on in, maybe you get a better look at it. Let me point it out to you. See, this deer has been here for quite a few hours. They like this because they can smell you coming, they can hear you coming. It's thick, you can't see them, but they can hear and smell. Those are their two primary defenses in this thick stuff. Let's go see if we can get real lucky. It's like a jungle in here. Every day requires a slightly different strategy based on all these conditions that we're going to talk about. You take a look around here now. Well, down here we have a very thick tag alder swamp. Tag alders are about the most wonderful cover a big buck likes. Earlier we scouted this area. We talked to a young man who actually missed a 10-point buck in this swamp. So we know there's at least one big buck that lives in here. How are we going to get him? He's not going to come out into the open, but he will sneak along this ridge. So we're going to make a stand here because we got all the factors working for us. The wind's coming across, so our scent is blowing up the hill away from the swamp. So we're not going to stand out here in the open either. We're going to go back here, and I'll prepare this area and show you some of the little tricks that'll help you when you get up on the stand. The first thing you want to do is get the dead brush away. Don't worry about noise now. Clean this out so you can walk around here a little bit without making noise, cracking leaves. Get right down to the bare ground. Clean it right out. Okay? Now I can turn without making noise. I can get up and down. Got to get rid of this. If that buck comes out of there and he hears anything strange, he's not going to come out right and get a shot at him. This is a 4.5 to 1.5 power scope. I like it for this close shooting. Now in here, I'm going to set it real wide. If somebody does frighten this buck out, he's liable to jump and run, and I'm not going to find him if that scope is set on a high power. So I'm going to keep it down low. I don't need a lot of magnification. Later in the day, that sun will be going across and setting. It'll be quite dark over here, and I'll be a little more hidden. I like that too. I'd like to recap some of the very important points on picking a stand. Location, 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 just like buying real estate. There's a swamp down here. There's runways that come along the edge of this rim. The wind's blowing across me and up the ridge, so my scent's not going there. There's a lot of light on me right now, but this cap helps me with this beak. And later today, when I'm on this stand, the sun's going to be there and I'll be in the dark. That's important. The other little things that mean a lot: clean out the base so you're not cracking twigs and breaking, limbs. Do all that when you first go in. That's important. Have your rifle on a low power on the scope. Have it handy. Make sure snow doesn't fall in your scope and block your sights. Have your binoculars ready and use them. Look through the brush to find the deer. Don't look at trees. Look through the trees. That's important. Location, your equipment, preparedness, field glasses, shooting lanes, and try and be comfortable. Now, let's apply what we've learned and go on a still hunt for a trophy buck. We moved up the hill, and here's what we found. Tracks and beds, so fresh, they're still steaming. There's a buck coming across the field with a doe. No, there's 2 does and a buck. If I move a couple steps, I get a whole new view of what's up ahead. There's 2 bucks in that crowd. There's a nice big buck. Two bucks are standing there just perfect. This is a moment only another hunter can really understand and appreciate. It's when you approach that trophy that's down, one that you put down with a good clean shot, a feeling of admiration for the animal, of triumph that you were able to outsmart it, to get close enough to make that shot. And yet a sadness that the hunt is over, at least for another year. In this program, we've reviewed the basic habits and characteristics of big bucks and the most important principles on which trophy whitetail hunting strategies are based. As we've just seen, the whitetail buck is a wild, secretive animal who spends most of his days in secluded, difficult to hunt places, except maybe during the rut. He has exceptional warning systems, especially the ability to smell, to hear, and to see very well. And he will sometimes hide right under a hunter's nose. At other times, he'll melt through the thicket like a ghost. To hunt him successfully, we have to know him. And to know him is to respect him, to love his world, and to love him too. No matter how smart we think we are, no matter how clever and how devious, there are no guarantees to trophy whitetail hunting, no absolutes, no surefire strategies, and I'm sure glad of that. That's why big bucks are wonderful and rare like fine diamonds. The more we know about big deer and about the great outdoors, the more we will enjoy our efforts, the trying, the hunting. Whether or not we succeed, a great deal of that success is in the personal effort we put forth, in the year-round enjoyment of scouting, and in just being out here in the great outdoors. Good hunting.